Did medieval queens truly leave behind fortunes of gold? Or was it something far more unexpected? What hidden secrets did they reveal about their lives, their loves, and their final desires? From the 5th to the 15th century. Get ready to uncover the astonishing last wills and testaments that rewrote history one parchment at a time. Number 10. Mary of Burgundy. The year is 1482. A chilling accident has just claimed the life of one of the most powerful women in Europe. Mary of Burgundy, Duchess, ruler of vast rich territories, and the wife of Maximilian of Austria, has fallen from her horse during a hunt. Her reign, though brief, was marked by intense political maneuvering and a fierce determination to protect her inheritance from the grasping hands of King Louis XI of France. She was, in essence, a queen without a crown, a sovereign in her own right, controlling lands that stretched from the North Sea to the Alps. Her will, written just days before her death, or perhaps during her final moments, offers a stark glimpse into her character, her priorities, and the very human anxieties of a woman facing her end far too soon. Mary's will, a document that scholars have scrutinized for centuries, wasn't just about dividing up jewels or lands. It was a strategic masterstroke, a desperate plea, and a deeply personal reflection all rolled into one. For a woman whose entire adult life had been a battle to maintain her independence against formidable male relatives and ambitious neighbors, her final act of legal self-assertion was nothing short of breathtaking. Mary left substantial sums for masses to be said for her soul, a common and important practice in the medieval period. This was not just a pious gesture. It was a perceived investment in her eternal salvation, a way to ensure her passage through purgatory and into heaven. She wanted masses said in various churches across her territories, particularly in Bruges, Ghent, and Mechelen, cities that had often been turbulent but were also the heart of her power. These aren't just numbers on a page. They represent the vast wealth of the Burgundian court, capable of funding perpetual prayers across an entire dominion. The sheer scale of these religious endowments speaks volumes about the spiritual importance placed on dying well in the late Middle Ages. But here is where Mary's will takes a truly fascinating turn. She explicitly named her young son Philip as her sole heir. This might seem obvious. He was her eldest child and male, however. The political climate was fraught with danger. Her father, Charles the Bold, had died without a male heir, plunging Burgundy into crisis. Louis XI of France had seized much of her territory, claiming it as a lapsed fief. Mary herself had been pressured into marriage with Maximilian of Austria, primarily to secure military protection against France. Her will, by firmly placing her son as the undisputed successor, was a direct challenge to any attempts by France, or even ambitious Burgundian nobles, to undermine her lineage. It was a legal shield for her infant son, a declaration that her bloodline, not French claim, held legitimate sway. Moreover, the will laid out specific instructions for her daughter Margaret. While not the primary heir to the ducal lands, Margaret was to inherit a significant dowry and receive an education befitting a future queen or duchess. This attention to her daughter's future, ensuring her prospects in the competitive marriage market of European royalty, shows Mary's foresight. It wasn't enough to secure her son's immediate inheritance. She also sought to perpetuate her family's influence through strategic alliances for her daughter. This level of detail, in a will particularly concerning a minor daughter's future, highlights a mother's concern intertwined with a ruler's political acumen. Perhaps the most poignant and truly astonishing aspect of Mary's will lies in its personal bequests. Unlike many royal wills that focus solely on state jewels or vast estates, Mary meticulously listed personal items to be distributed among her ladies-in-waiting and closest servants. She left specific pieces of jewelry, garments, and even small sums of money to women who had served her faithfully. These weren't grand gifts by royal standards, but intimate tokens of appreciation. One account mentions a particular diamond brooch, another a richly embroidered gown, each assigned to a specific individual. This reveals a side of Mary that goes beyond the formidable ruler and the political strategist. It shows a woman who valued loyalty and personal connection, who saw the human beings around her, not just their functions. This level of personal detail in a will for a ruler of her stature is remarkably rare. It tells you something profound about her. She wasn't just a symbol of power. She was a woman who formed bonds and felt gratitude. In a time when death often meant a sudden shift in loyalties and the dispersal of the household, Mary made sure her most intimate circle was remembered and rewarded. It was her way of asserting control over her personal legacy, ensuring that those who had been close to her would not be forgotten in the reshuffling of power after her unexpected demise. Consider also the location of her burial. Mary stipulated that she wished to be buried in the Church of Our Lady in Bruges, alongside her father, Charles the Bold. This choice was politically charged. Bruges was a thriving economic hub and a fiercely independent city within her domains. By choosing to be buried there, she was reaffirming her connection to her Burgundian patrimony, distinguishing herself from her Austrian husband's family, and reinforcing the idea that she and her children were rooted in these rich Low Countries. Her tomb, magnificent and ornate, stands as a testament to her wishes, a physical manifestation of her final command to assert her Burgundian identity, even in death. Her will, in its entirety, stands as a powerful testament to a woman who, despite facing immense pressure and a tragically short life, retained agency and a clear vision for her legacy. It wasn't just a legal document. It was a final, emphatic declaration of her love for her children, her loyalty to her territories, and her deep personal connections. For a young woman who died in the prime of her life, Mary of Burgundy's will ensured her story would continue to be told, not just through the grand sweep of history, but through the intimate details of her final wishes. Number 9. Eleanor of Provence. Eleanor of Provence, the queen consort of King Henry III of England, lived a long and tumultuous life, spanning much of the 13th century. She was a woman of immense influence, a patron of the arts, and a formidable political player in her own right. Her tenure as queen was often fraught with challenges, from the baronial wars that plagued her husband's reign to the intricate diplomatic dances required to secure alliances and maintain peace. When Eleanor finally penned her last will and testament, decades after her husband's death and long into her widowhood, it wasn't just a dry legal document. It was a reflection of her enduring piety, her deep familial bonds, and her astonishing wealth, accumulated through years of careful management and royal prerogative. Eleanor's will, which scholars have studied in detail, lays bare the soul of a queen deeply devoted to her faith. One of the most striking features is the sheer volume of bequests dedicated to religious institutions and charitable causes. She didn't just leave a small sum. She endowed numerous monasteries, convents, and hospitals across England and even parts of France. These endowments were not merely financial. They often included specific chalices, vestments, and liturgical books that she herself had commissioned or owned. The will specifies funds for the perpetual maintenance of lamps before altars, for the provision of food for the poor on specific feast days, and for the saying of countless masses for her soul, her husband's soul, and the souls of her children. This demonstrates a deep personal belief in the efficacy of prayer and good works for salvation, a core tenet of medieval Christianity. But here is where Eleanor's will becomes truly astonishing. She was meticulously precise about the religious items she wished to be distributed. For instance, she bequeathed a specific golden chalice inlaid with precious stones to the Abbey of Fontefraud, where her mother, Beatrice of Savoy, and other royal kin were buried. To Westminster Abbey, a place she deeply cherished and had significantly influenced through her patronage of its rebuilding, she left numerous rich vestments and service books, some of which were illuminated with exquisite artistry. These weren't just random items. They were precious artifacts that spoke of her personal devotion and her role as a queen who understood the power of visual splendor in religious worship. Beyond the spiritual, Eleanor's will showcases her enduring love and concern for her children. Despite her eldest son, King Edward I, being a powerful ruler in his own right, Eleanor made several specific bequests to him, including personal jewels and objects that had belonged to his father. This was more than just a passing on of inheritance. It was a symbolic transfer of lineage, a reminder of the continuity of the royal family. She also made provisions for her younger children who were still alive, ensuring their financial security and their standing within the royal court. Her daughter, Beatrice, Duchess of Brittany, received a substantial sum and specific items of jewelry, reflecting a mother's continued affection and a queen's understanding of the importance of maintaining alliances. Now let's talk about the incredible wealth and strategic thinking behind Eleanor's will. During her long widowhood, Eleanor was incredibly adept at managing her dower lands, which were vast and productive. Her will reflects this shrewd financial management. She didn't just bequeath existing assets, she directed specific funds to be used to free prisoners held for debt, a remarkable act of charity that went beyond standard almsgiving. This suggests a queen who was not only pious, but also deeply aware of social injustices and willing to use her personal wealth to alleviate suffering. This particular clause stands out as a testament to her character, showing a compassionate side often overshadowed by her political activities. Another surprising element found in her will is the detailed instructions for her burial. Eleanor had originally expressed a desire to be buried at the convent of Amesbury, where she had retired in her later years. However, her will confirmed that her heart would be buried separately at the Franciscan Church in London and her body at Amesbury. Practice of separate burial for different body parts, particularly the heart, was not uncommon for high-ranking medieval individuals. It allowed them to be associated with multiple sacred sites or to demonstrate particular devotion to specific religious orders. For Eleanor, her heart's placement with the Franciscans, an order known for its emphasis on poverty and preaching, speaks to a deeply personal spiritual commitment beyond the grand royal ceremonies. Her will also made provisions for her personal household. Unlike some wills that might simply dismiss servants, Eleanor made sure to leave specific bequests to her trusted ladies in waiting, her chaplains, and even lower-ranking household staff who had served her for many years. These gifts, ranging from small sums of money to personal clothing or lesser jewels, illustrate a queen who valued loyalty and recognized the contributions of those who served her daily. It was a gesture of gratitude, ensuring that those who had been integral to her life were not left destitute upon her death. In essence, Eleanor of Provence's last will and testament is a living document. It shows a queen who was fiercely religious, deeply attached to her family, and remarkably astute in managing her wealth and her spiritual legacy. It reveals her priorities: salvation, family continuity, and charitable works. Her will wasn't just an end-of-life declaration. It was a profound statement of her values and her enduring impact on England, leaving behind a legacy that stretched far beyond the confines of her physical life. Number 8. Isabella of France. Isabella of France, often famously known as the She-Wolf of France, lived a life that reads like a dramatic epic. Daughter of a powerful French king, Queen of England, through her marriage to Edward II, and later a key figure in his downfall and the rise of her son, Edward III. Isabella's story is one of ambition, betrayal, and power. Her final will, crafted after years of political influence and then a period of enforced quietude, offers a fascinating glimpse into the mind of a woman who had once held immense power and endured significant personal and political upheaval. It's a testament to her enduring piety, her familial connections, and perhaps a subtle assertion of her continued importance, even in her later years. When Isabella made her will in 1357, she was no longer the active political force she had once been. Her son, King Edward III, had effectively taken over power from her and her controversial ally, Roger Mortimer, years earlier. Yet even in her relative retirement at Hertford Castle, Isabella remained a significant figure, revered as the Queen Mother. Her will reflects this complex status. It's the will of a devout noblewoman, but also one who remembered the trappings and duties of royalty. One of the most striking aspects of Isabella's will is her profound devotion to the Church and her meticulous attention to spiritual matters. She left significant sums for masses to be said for her soul, a common but vitally important practice in the medieval period. What makes her provision stand out is the detail. She specified multiple churches and religious orders across England, ensuring that her prayers would be perpetual and widespread. She bequeathed valuable religious artifacts, including chalices, crosses, and relics to specific cathedrals and monasteries. For instance, she left a magnificent jeweled cross to the church at Amesbury Priory, where her daughter Joan was a nun. This not only shows her piety, but also her deep personal connection to certain religious houses where her family members resided. But here is where her will gets truly intriguing. Isabella made a particular bequest to the Friars Minor, Franciscans, and Friars Preachers, Dominicans, in London and other major towns, requesting prayers for her soul and the souls of her ancestors. The Franciscans in particular were known for their emphasis on poverty and direct spiritual connection, which some historians suggest resonated with Isabella's desire for atonement or spiritual peace after her turbulent life. Her choice of specific orders and the emphasis on the souls of her ancestors, including her controversial husband, Edward II, provides a window into her private spiritual landscape. It suggests a desire to reconcile with her past and secure her place in the afterlife. Her familial bequests are also quite telling. While her son, Edward III, was already king and incredibly wealthy, Isabella still made specific personal gifts to him. These weren't grand estates, but items of personal significance such as particular pieces of jewelry or plate that had been in the family for generations. These were symbolic gestures, reinforcing the bond between mother and son and perhaps a final act of maternal affection. Her will also provided for her daughters, including those who were already queens in other European kingdoms, further solidifying the family's interconnectedness across royal houses. The attention to gifts for her grandchildren also highlights her role as a matriarch, ensuring that her legacy extended through the next generation. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in Isabella's will relates to her heart. She made a specific request that her heart be buried separately from her body at the Franciscan Church in London. This was a practice sometimes seen among royalty, allowing for symbolic association with a place of special devotion. What makes Isabella's request particularly poignant, however, is the prevailing historical theory, though not definitively proven, that she carried her deceased husband, Edward II's heart in a casket with her for years after his death. If this is true, her request to have her own heart buried separately, potentially near where his was interred, adds a layer of tragic romance and unresolved emotional complexity to her final wishes. It suggests a lingering connection to the man she had once loved and then famously overthrown. A quiet act of reconciliation. Isabella also left provisions for her household servants, a common practice, but one that reveals her understanding of social responsibility. She bequeathed sums of money and specific items of clothing or household goods to her most trusted ladies-in-waiting, chaplains, and even the lower-ranking staff who had served her faithfully for years. This was not just charity. It was a recognition of their loyalty and service, ensuring their well-being after her passing. This detail humanizes the she-wolf and shows a queen who, despite her political machinations, had a sense of duty and personal connection to those around her. Finally, Isabella's will included instructions for her burial place. She wished to be interred at the Franciscan Church in London, next to the tomb of her sister-in-law, Joan of Acre. This choice, away from the traditional royal burial ground of Westminster Abbey, is significant. It suggests a personal preference, a desire for a less grand, more intimate resting place associated with an order she deeply admired. It also subtly removes her from the direct shadow of her husband's controversial reign, allowing her a final resting place defined by her own spiritual choices. In conclusion, Isabella of France's will is more than a list of bequests. It is a nuanced portrait of a formidable woman in her later years. It shows her piety, her lingering family affections, and the careful attention she paid to her spiritual future. And in the possible symbolism of her heart's burial, it offers a fleeting glimpse into the unresolved emotions and complexities of a life lived at the very center of power and scandal. Number 7. Blanche of Castile. Blanche of Castile, Queen of France, and twice regent during the minority and absence of her son Louis IX, St. Louis, was a woman of immense strength, piety, and political acumen. Throughout the first half of the 13th century, she masterfully navigated the treacherous waters of medieval European politics, protecting her son's claim to the throne, suppressing baronial rebellions, and even launching crusades. When she died in 1252, her last will and testament was not merely a distribution of goods, but a powerful reflection of her unwavering faith, her strategic mind, and her deep love for her family and the kingdom she had so diligently served. Blanche's will is a document that highlights her profound religious devotion, a characteristic that defined her public and private life. She dedicated an astonishing proportion of her wealth to spiritual ends. She bequeathed vast sums for the saying of masses, for her soul and the souls of her husband, King Louis VIII, and her deceased children. This wasn't just a standard royal donation. She specified the establishment of perpetual chaplaincies in various monasteries and convents, ensuring that prayers would continue for a generation. She left elaborate liturgical vestments, jeweled chalices, and illuminated manuscripts to her favorite abbeys, particularly those she had personally patronized, such as the Abbey of Maubuisson, which she founded. These specific donations show her deep personal connection to these institutions and her understanding of their spiritual and cultural importance. But here is where Blanche's will reveals her practical and strategic genius. She wasn't just giving money away. She was investing in the spiritual infrastructure of her kingdom, ensuring that her legacy would be tied to its religious prosperity. The detailed instructions for the care of the poor, including provisions for almshouses and hospitals, reflect her deep commitment to charity. She also provided dowries for young, poor noblewomen and women who had lost their families, a remarkable act of social welfare that went beyond typical royal almsgiving and directly addressed the vulnerability of women in her society. This shows a ruler who understood the social fabric and sought to strengthen it through compassionate action. Her familial bequests are also incredibly telling. While her son Louis IX was by then a devout and respected King, Blanche still made specific personal gifts to him. These were often symbolic. A particular ring worn by his father, a piece of artwork commissioned by her for her family. These weren't about material wealth, but about the continuation of lineage and memory. She also provided for her other living children, ensuring their financial security and their standing within the French nobility. For her daughter Isabella, who became a devout nun and later founded the Abbey of Longchamp, Blanche bequeathed specific devotional items and additional funds, supporting her daughter's religious path and her own charitable endeavors. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Blanche's will is its focus on the regency. Even in death, she maintained her watchful eye over the stability of the kingdom. She provided specific instructions for the continuation of certain administrative policies, particularly concerning the financial management of the royal demesne. While not explicitly naming a regent, as her son was of age, the will implicitly underscored her continuing influence on the affairs of state, urging her son to maintain the strong governance she had established. This showed as her understanding of governance, her meticulous attention to detail, and her lingering desire to ensure the prosperity and stability of France. It was her final act of statesmanship, a testament to her role as one of the most effective regents in French history. Blanche's will also contained specific provisions for her burial. She wished to be buried at the Abbey of Maubuisson, the Cistercian convent she founded near Pontoise. This was a deliberate choice, away from the traditional royal necropolis at Saint-Denis. By choosing Maubuisson, she reaffirmed her personal connection to her foundation and her deep devotion to the Cistercian order. Her tomb, though later desecrated during the French Revolution, was meant to be a simple yet dignified resting place, reflecting her piety and humility despite her immense power. The choice of her final resting place was a profound statement about her identity, emphasizing her role as a devout founder rather than solely a queen. Moreover, her will made sure to remember her loyal household. She left specific sums of money and valuable goods to her ladies-in-waiting, her chamberlains and her chaplains. These were not just token gestures. They were substantial gifts that acknowledged years of faithful service. For a queen who often ruled with an iron fist, this reveals a more personal, compassionate side, showing that she valued the loyalty and dedication of those who served her daily. It solidified her image, not just as a formidable political figure, but as a fair and benevolent mistress. In sum, Blanche of Castile's last will and testament is a masterclass in royal legacy building. It details her unwavering faith, her astute political mind, and her deep personal connections. It is a document that speaks not just of property and possessions, but of piety, family, and a profound sense of responsibility towards the kingdom she so effectively governed. It remains a powerful record of a queen who, even in death, continued to shape the destiny of France. Number 6. Philippa of Hainaut. Philippa of Hainaut, Queen of England and wife of King Edward III, was a monarch beloved by her people, known for her generosity, piety, and keen intelligence. She was more than just a queen consort. She was a skilled diplomat, a compassionate intercessor, and a dedicated mother to a large brood of children. During her long reign in the 14th century, Philippa was a consistent calming influence on her often bellicose husband, and her patronage of arts and education left a lasting mark. When she died in 1369, her last will and testament was not merely a collection of bequests, but a powerful reflection of her enduring piety, her deep familial bonds, and her astonishing personal wealth. Philippa's will, a meticulous document, begins with a profound declaration of her faith, a common but deeply felt sentiment among medieval monarchs. She designated substantial sums for masses and prayers for her soul and for the souls of her husband, her deceased children, and her ancestors. This was more than a formal gesture. It was a deeply personal commitment to securing her place in the afterlife. What truly sets her will apart is the scale and specificity of these religious endowments. She wasn't just giving money, she was setting up perpetual charitable foundations. She directed specific funds to be used for the poor, for hospitals, and for the maintenance of religious houses that she had personally favored. For instance, she made significant provisions for the Carthusian Monastery of London and the Collegiate Church of St. Stephen's Chapel at Westminster, both institutions that had benefited from her patronage during her lifetime. But here is where Philippa's will becomes truly remarkable. She was particularly attentive to the details of her religious gifts. She bequeathed specific liturgical items, some adorned with precious stones and intricate carvings, to various churches. One account suggests she left a unique set of embroidered vestments, likely made by her own ladies, or under her supervision, to a particular chapel where she often prayed. This reveals a queen who is not only devout, but also invested personally in the material culture of worship. These were not just valuable objects. They were symbols of her personal faith and dedication. Her familial bequests are also incredibly poignant. Philippa had many children, and though several had died before her, she made specific provisions for all her surviving offspring. To her eldest surviving son, Edward the Black Prince, she left personal jewels and pieces of plate that had belonged to his father, strengthening the familial ties and ensuring the continuity of royal inheritance. For her other sons and daughters, including John of Gaunt and Edmund of Langley, she left substantial sums, jewels, and specific household items ensuring their financial security and their continued prominence. Her meticulousness in providing for each child tailored to their individual circumstances speaks volumes about her maternal love and her understanding of the complex dynamics of the royal family. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in Philippa's will is her attention to the small details of her personal possessions and her household. Unlike some wills that focus solely on large estates or royal regalia, Philippa listed specific items of clothing, furniture, and even small trinkets to be distributed among her most trusted ladies in waiting and servants. One historical record mentions a particular silver goblet, another a velvet cushion, each designated for a specific individual who had served her. These were not grand gifts, but intimate tokens of appreciation demonstrating a queen who saw and valued the people who surrounded her daily. This level of personal detail humanizes Philippa and shows her immense gratitude and loyalty to her household. It suggests a queen who was not just a figurehead but a benevolent mistress who cared deeply for her personal retinue. Philippa's will also laid out precise instructions for her burial. She wished to be buried at Westminster Abbey, the traditional resting place for English monarchs, but she specified that her tomb should be near the high altar, a place of honor. She also gave instructions for the design of her effigy, desiring it to be carved from alabaster, a material known for its beauty and detail. The tomb, which still exists today, is a magnificent piece of medieval sculpture reflecting her importance and her desire for a lasting, dignified memorial. Her choice of burial site and the meticulous instructions for her monument underscore her self-perception as a queen who had played a central role in England's history and wished to be remembered accordingly. Moreover, her will included provisions for the maintenance of her various charities and foundations. She had a particular interest in education and had been a patron of Queen's College, Oxford. Her will ensured that funds would continue to flow to such institutions, showing her long-term vision for the betterment of society through learning and religious practice. This proactive approach to continuing her charitable work after her death reveals a queen who thought beyond her immediate lifespan, aiming for a lasting positive impact. In essence, Philippa of Hainault's last will and testament is a profound document that shapes her piety, her deep maternal affection to detail. It is a testament to a queen who was not only beloved in her lifetime, but who sought to ensure her spiritual and charitable legacy continued long after her passing. Her will reveals her as a kind, thoughtful, and deeply religious woman who left an indelible mark on the Kingdom of England, one detail at a time. Number 5. Joanna, the First of Naples. Joanna, the First of Naples, Queen of Naples and Sicily, Countess of Provence, and a host of other titles reigned for nearly 40 years in the tumultuous 14th century. Her life was an astonishing tapestry, woven with murder, intrigue, multiple marriages, and excommunication. She ruled a kingdom that was a crossroads of cultures and ambitions, constantly battling for control against powerful relatives. And the Pope, when she finally met a violent end, almost certainly strangled on the orders of her vengeful cousin and adopted heir, Charles of Durazzo. Her last will and testament, though dictated under duress and likely lost or heavily suppressed, reveals fragments of her astonishing revealee. Precise details of Joanna's final will are somewhat shrouded in the mists of time and political manipulation. Unlike other queens who had the luxury of composing their wills in peace, Joanna was a prisoner, cornered by enemies. Accounts from chroniclers of the time suggest she managed to dictate a will shortly before her death in 1382. This document, if it survived intact, would have been an incredible testament to her enduring spirit. What we know about it comes from references in later documents and contemporary reports, painting a picture of a queen fighting for her legacy until her last breath. One of the most striking elements attributed to Joanna's will is her astonishing decision regarding her succession. Despite being childless and having adopted Charles of Durazzo as her heir, years prior, she made a last-minute change. Under the immense pressure of her impending doom, she revoked Charles's adoption and instead named Louis I, Duke of Anjou, a member of the French royal house and a distant relative, as her new heir. This was a direct, explosive challenge to the powerful Durazzo faction, who were poised to seize her kingdom. It was a final, audacious political move, a desperate attempt to prevent her enemies from fully profiting from her downfall and to ensure the Angevin line, however distantly, continued to rule Naples. This shift made under duress shows a queen whose political instincts remained sharp even in captivity. It was a gamble, a last throw of the dice to shake the destiny of her kingdom, even if it meant prolonging the conflict after her death. But here is where her will gets even more intriguing. Joanna was a deeply religious woman despite the numerous controversies surrounding her life, including accusations of complicity in the murder of her first husband. Reports suggest her will contains substantial provisions for masses to be said for her soul and for the souls of her various deceased husbands and family members. Given the precarious state of her soul in the eyes of the Church, she had been excommunicated multiple times. These bequests were likely even more fervent than usual, a desperate plea for divine mercy. She also made provisions for charitable donations to be given to the poor, a standard act of medieval piety, but one that perhaps took on extra urgency for a queen facing a grim end. Her will also made sure to mention her surviving family members, however distantly. Despite her turbulent relationships and childlessness, she had nieces and nephews and other relatives from her various marriages. While the specifics are lost, it is believed she designated some personal items or small sums to these individuals, perhaps as a final gesture of connection in a life often devoid of stable family bonds. These were not major political bequests, but quiet acts of remembrance that highlight the human element of a queen caught in a web of political machinations. Perhaps the most astonishing and tragic aspect of Joanna's will is its ultimate fate. Because she made the dramatic decision to disinherit Charles of Durazzo and name a French heir, her will was almost certainly suppressed or destroyed by the victorious Durazzo faction. It was a testament to her defiant spirit, but also a document that, by challenging the new power structure, was doomed to be erased from the official record. The very act of making such a will under duress, knowing its likely fate, speaks volumes about her unyielding character. It was a final, symbolic act of resistance against her oppressors, a refusal to grant them the satisfaction of a complete victory. Historians have pieced together fragments of this will from contemporary correspondence and legal challenges that followed her death. These fragments paint a picture of a queen who, even facing execution, sought to control her narrative and her succession. The fact that the will became a source of ongoing conflict, fueling the long and devastating Angevin Durazzo wars for control of Naples, further goes its power and its significance. It was a document that, even in its suppression, continued to shape the political landscape of southern Italy for decades. In essence, Joanna, the First of Naples' last will and testament is a powerful, if partially lost, declaration of a queen's final defiance. It was a testament to her astonishing political courage, her enduring piety, and her ultimate struggle for control over her kingdom's destiny. Though she died a prisoner, her will was a final, desperate roar, a document that, even in its fragmented state, continued to echo through the corridors of power, sparking wars and shaping the future of a kingdom. It stands as a testament to a woman who, even in death, refused to be silent. Number 4. Matilda of England. Matilda of England, often known as Empress Matilda, lived a life of relentless ambition, unyielding determination, and tragic reversals. Daughter of King Henry I of England, wife of Holy Roman Emperor Henry V, and later married to Geoffrey Plantagenet, Count of Anjou, she was destined for a life of power. After her brother's death and her father's desperate attempts to secure her succession, she engaged in a brutal civil war known as the Anarchy against her cousin Stephen for the English throne. Though she never formally reigned as Queen of England, her influence was profound, and her son ultimately became King Henry II, founder of the Plantagenet dynasty. Her last will and testament, composed much later in life after her political battles had subsided, offers a captivating glimpse into her priorities, her enduring piety, and her formidable resolve. Matilda's will, which scholars have meticulously studied, was composed around 1167, well after she had effectively ceded the active fight for the English throne to her son Henry II. By this point, she had settled into a role as a respected and influential matriarch, dividing her time between Normandy and her beloved Abbey of Bec. Her will reflects this shift from active combatant to powerful figurehead, focusing on spiritual matters, family legacy, and thoughtful provision for her loyal supporters. One of the most striking aspects of Matilda's will is her profound devotion to the Church and her strategic bequests to various religious institutions. She made generous provisions for monasteries and convents, particularly those in Normandy where she spent her later years. She also left specific liturgical items, some of great value to these foundations. For example, she bequeathed the magnificent Gospel book, richly illuminated and bound, to the Abbey of Bec, a place she cherished deeply and where she spent her final years. This wasn't just a religious gesture. It was an investment in her spiritual legacy and a reflection of her personal connection to specific monastic communities. These gifts serve not only to pray for her soul, but also to enhance the prestige and resources of the institutions she favored. But here is where Matilda's will reveals her practical and deeply personal side. She made a specific bequest to the Abbey of Bec, stipulating that her body should be buried there. This was a deliberate choice. While many of her royal ancestors were buried in grander locations, Matilda chose a place that reflected her piety and her intellectual interests. The Abbey of Bec was a renowned center of learning and spirituality. Her tomb, though later moved, was designed to be simple yet dignified, reflecting her desire for a final resting place that symbolized humility and devotion rather than earthly power. This choice is a poignant reflection of a woman who, despite a life of intense political struggle, found solace and meaning in spiritual pursuits. While her son, Henry II, was by then a powerful and successful king of England, Matilda still made specific personal gifts to him. These were often symbolic, such as particular pieces of jewelry or an ancient relic that had belonged to her father, King Henry I. These gifts reinforced the continuity of the royal line and underscored her role as the matriarch who had secured the throne for her son. She also made provisions for her other children, including her younger son William, ensuring his financial security and standing. Her attention to her grandchildren, including young Henry, the young king, shows her vision for the future of the Plantagenet dynasty. These specific personal bequests reveal a mother's affection and a grandmother's hope for the future. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in Matilda's will is her careful provision for her loyal household and her long-serving supporters. Despite her reputation for being stern and unyielding, she made sure to remember those who had stood by her during the tumultuous years of the Anarchy. She bequeathed specific sums of money, clothing, and even personal items to her most trusted knights, ladies-in-waiting, and household servants. These were not just token gestures. They were significant gifts that acknowledged their unwavering loyalty and service. This act of thoughtful gratitude humanizes the formidable empress and demonstrates her recognition of the personal sacrifices made by those who had served her. It's a powerful statement about the importance of loyalty in a world where allegiances often shifted with the political winds. Moreover, Matilda's will also touched upon matters of justice and reparation. She directed specific funds to be used for freeing prisoners, particularly those imprisoned for debt or minor offenses, and for compensating individuals who had suffered losses during the Civil War. This astonishing clause reveals a queen who, despite her own struggles for power, harbored a deep sense of justice and sought to right the wrongs of a long and brutal conflict. Shown as her compassion and her desire to leave a legacy of reconciliation rather than just one of conflict. This level of social awareness and charitable intent was not universally present in royal wills of the period. In essence, Matilda of England's last will and testament is a multifaceted document. It highlights her profound piety, her unwavering commitment to her family's legacy, and her surprising acts of personal kindness and social justice. It is a powerful record of a woman who, though she never wore the English crown, shaped the course of its history, and who even in death sought to define her legacy on her own terms. Number 3. Eleanor of Aquitaine. Eleanor of Aquitaine, one of the most powerful and captivating figures of the Middle Ages, lived an astonishingly long life, spanning most of the 12th and early 13th centuries. Queen of France, then Queen of England, Duchess of Aquitaine, in her own right mother to 2 English kings, Richard the Lionheart and John. And a participant in the Second Crusade, Eleanor's life was a grand saga. Evodical intrigue, personal drama, and immense power. By the time she drew up her last will and testament around 1202, she was over 80 years old. Having outlived most of her children and seen countless historical events unfold, her will is a testament not just to her immense wealth, but to her profound piety, her enduring love for her family, and her astonishing political foresight, even from her deathbed. Eleanor's will, a document of immense historical significance, begins with a deep expression of her faith, a common yet deeply felt sentiment for medieval royals. She designated vast sums for masses and prayers for her soul and for the souls of her deceased husbands, King Louis VII of France and King Henry II of England, as well as her beloved sons, particularly Richard the Lionheart. She made specific provisions for various monasteries and convents, leaving valuable relics, liturgical items, and land endowments. For instance, she made significant bequests to the Abbey of Fontefraud, a place she cherished deeply, and where she intended to be buried alongside Henry and Richard. This was more than just a pious act. It was a strategic investment in her spiritual legacy, ensuring perpetual prayers for her family line. But here is where Eleanor's will becomes truly astonishing. She was meticulously precise about her religious gifts, often specifying particular jeweled chalices, embroidered vestments, or illuminated manuscripts to specific religious houses. These weren't just valuable items, they were often objects she had personally commissioned or used in her private devotions, reflecting her profound personal connection to her faith. Her choice of Fontefraud, a prominent abbey for both men and women, was itself a powerful statement, signifying her connection to the monastic ideal and her desire to be eternally linked with her family in a place of deep spiritual meaning. Her familial bequests are also incredibly poignant and strategic. Despite her turbulent relationship with her son, King John, who was the reigning monarch at the time of her death, Eleanor made specific, significant provisions for him. These weren't mere token gifts. They included valuable jewels, pieces of plate, and even substantial sums of money, designed to aid his shaky reign and ensure the continuity of the Plantagenet dynasty. This showed her pragmatic wisdom and her continued commitment to the family line despite their past conflicts. She also made specific provisions for her surviving daughters, ensuring their financial security and continuing their influence through strategic alliances. Her deep maternal love, intertwined with a keen political mind, shines through these detailed provisions. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in Eleanor's will relates to her vast personal wealth and her strategic distribution of it. As Duchess of Aquitaine in her own right, she commanded immense resources. Her will systematically laid out the future of her ducal lands, ensuring they passed to her son, John, as per feudal custom, but also attaching conditions or recommendations were necessary. This demonstrates her enduring authority and her concern for the stability of her territories, even in her extreme old age. She also made provisions for her personal jewels, her extensive wardrobe, and her vast collection of treasures. These were not just random items, they were symbols of her power, her travels, and her cultural patronage. Beyond the grand bequests, Eleanor also remembered her loyal household. She left specific sums of money, clothing, and even land grants to her most trusted ladies, in waiting, her chaplains, and her household servants who had served her for decades. These were not simply acts of charity, they were acknowledgments of unwavering loyalty and service. For a queen who had spent years in captivity and faced countless betrayals, these thoughtful gestures toward those who had remained faithful underscore her appreciation for genuine loyalty. It reveals a surprisingly personal side to a formidable ruler, showing her as a benevolent mistress who cared for the well-being of her retainers. Moreover, her will included fascinating details about her specific artistic and intellectual interests. While not explicitly stated as such, the bequests of illuminated manuscripts, some featuring courtly themes or philosophical texts, imply her deep appreciation for learning and culture. It suggests a queen who was not just a political force, but also a woman of considerable intellectual curiosity and refinement. These were not merely possessions, they were extensions of her identity as a patron of the arts and a woman who valued knowledge. In essence, Eleanor of Aquitaine's last will and testament is an incredible window into the mind of one of history's most powerful women. It highlights her profound religious devotion, her enduring love and strategic concern for her family, and her remarkable attention to detail in managing her vast wealth and complex legacy. It is a testament to a queen who, even at the very end of her extraordinary life, continued to command, to plan, and to shape the destiny of her family and her realms. Her will stands as a final, powerful declaration of her enduring impact. Number 2. Isabella of Castile. Isabella, the First of Castile, often known as Isabella the Catholic, was a queen who reshaped the map of Europe and the world. Alongside her husband Ferdinand II of Aragon, she unified Spain, completed the Reconquista, expelled Jews and Muslims, and sponsored Christopher Columbus's voyage to the Americas. Her reign from 1474 to 1504 marked a pivotal transition from the late medieval to the early modern era. When she made her final will and testament in 1504 on her deathbed, it was not merely a distribution of earthly possessions, it was a profound political statement, a spiritual declaration, and a detailed blueprint for the future of a nascent empire. Her will is an astonishing document that reveals her unwavering faith, her strategic vision, and her fierce determination to ensure the continuity of her dynastic and religious legacy. Isabella's will is a masterwork of statesmanship. It opens with an eloquent and deeply personal profession of faith, outlining her belief in the Catholic Church and her fervent hope for salvation. This was more than a formality. It reflected the core of her identity and her reign, which was deeply intertwined with religious fervor. She directed vast sums for masses and prayers for her soul and for the souls of her deceased parents, her husband, and her many children who had preceded her in death. She stipulated specific charitable bequests to hospitals, orphanages, and religious orders across Castile, ensuring that her spiritual legacy would be actively engaged in supporting the poor and the vulnerable. But here is where Isabella's will becomes truly groundbreaking and astonishing. She meticulously outlined a succession of her kingdoms, ensuring that her daughter Joanna, later known as Joanna the Mad, and her husband Philip the Handsome would inherit Castile. However, she also included critical provisions that revealed her deep concern for the political stability and religious unity of Spain. She stipulated that if Joanna proved incapable of ruling, a foreshadowing of Joanna's mental instability, Ferdinand should act as regent. This was an astonishing act of foresight, ensuring continuity and stability in a period of potential dynastic crisis. She also provided a separate fund for Ferdinand to act as regent, highlighting her trust in him to maintain their unified kingdom. This foresight was crucial and ultimately saved Spain from fracturing during a period of uncertainty. Her will also made incredibly specific and able provisions regarding the territories newly acquired in the Americas. Isabella decreed that the indigenous peoples of the newly discovered lands must be treated justly and not be enslaved, while the reality of Spanish colonization often diverged sharply from these ideals. This clause in her will is a truly astonishing statement for its time. It reflects a queen who, despite participating in the brutal Reconquista, held a vision, however imperfectly applied, of Christian justice, even for newly encountered populations. This specific instruction reveals a complex moral framework and a desire to impose a degree of ethical conduct on a rapacious colonial enterprise. It was a groundbreaking legal and moral directive from a European monarch concerning non-European peoples. Beyond the political and spiritual, Isabella's will also contained highly personal and poignant bequests. She left specific items of her vast collection of jewels, precious metals and tapestries to her surviving children and grandchildren. These were not just valuable assets, they were often imbued with symbolic meaning, representing the history of Castile or the personal taste of a queen who was a renowned patron of the arts. She also made provisions for her personal household, ensuring that her trusted ladies-in-waiting, her physicians and her household staff were well provided for, a testament to her loyalty to those who served her. Perhaps the most astonishing detail in Isabella's will is her specific instruction for her burial place. She wished to be buried in the Alhambra, the former Muslim palace in Granada, which she and Ferdinand had conquered in 1492. She stipulated that her tomb should be simple, without elaborate decoration, until the royal chapel in Granada, a grander structure she had commissioned, was completed. This choice of the Alhambra as her initial resting place was deeply symbolic. It affirmed her triumph in the Reconquista, marking the final victory of Christian Spain over Muslim rule. It also represented her desire to be buried in the heart of the newly unified kingdom, a powerful statement of her identity as the architect of modern Spain. Her will also made sure to reaffirm the joint nature of her rule with Ferdinand. Despite being Queen of Castile in her own right, the document frequently uses language that speaks to their shared enterprise and their unified vision. This was a deliberate legal and political act, solidifying the power-sharing arrangement that had made their reign so effective and ensuring that their combined legacy would endure. In essence, Isabella of Castile's last will and testament is a monumental document that transcends mere inheritance. It is a profound declaration of her unwavering faith, her remarkable political acumen, and her astonishing vision for a unified and Catholic Spain. It reveals a queen who, even on her deathbed, was actively shaping the future of an emerging global power, leaving a legacy that would impact centuries to come, from the Americas to the core of Europe. Number 1. Margaret of Denmark. Margaret of Denmark, often hailed as the Semiramis of the North, or the Queen who created a kingdom, was arguably the most powerful woman in 14th and early 15th century Europe. Through a combination of astute diplomacy, military prowess, and strategic marriages, she unified Denmark, Norway, and Sweden into the Kalmar Union, a powerful confederation that dominated Scandinavia for over a century. A regent for her young son and then for her great-nephew Eric of Pomerania, Margaret ruled with an iron will and an unmatched political genius. When she passed away suddenly in 1412, her last will and testament was not merely a personal document. It was a profound declaration of her spiritual devotion, her deep commitment to the Union, and her astonishing vision for its future. Margaret's will which scholars have meticulously studied, begins with a deeply pious declaration of faith, a hallmark of medieval wills, but particularly fervent in Margaret's case. She designated enormous sums for masses and prayers for her soul, and for the souls of her deceased husband, King Haakon, the Sixth of Norway, and her beloved son, Olaf IV, who had died young. She made significant provisions for numerous churches and monasteries across all three kingdoms of the Union. What truly sets her will apart is the scale of these endowments. She wasn't just making a few gifts. She established perpetual chaplaincies, funded the rebuilding of churches, and provided valuable liturgical items such as richly adorned altars and unique relics to ensure that prayers would continue for her dynasty for generations. This was a strategic spiritual investment designed to solidify the Union's religious foundations and her family's divine favor. But here is where Margaret's will becomes truly astonishing and reveals her unparalleled political genius. Despite her immense power, she had no direct heir. Her son Olaf had died young, and she ruled through her adopted great-nephew, Eric. Her will carefully outlined the succession of the Kalmar Union, confirming Eric as the undisputed ruler. However, she also included critical provisions that showed her deep concern for the stability and continuation of the Union itself. She stipulated that key properties and revenues from her vast personal estates were to be irrevocably tied to the crown of the Union, not to any one kingdom or a specific family line outside of the Union. This was a brilliant legal maneuver designed to prevent the Union from fracturing upon her death and to ensure that the wealth she had accumulated would serve the common good of the three united realms. It was a foundational document for the Union's future, a testament to her vision for a united Scandinavia. Her will also contained incredibly specific and able provisions regarding the financial health and administration of the Union. Margaret was renowned for her fiscal prudence and her ability to accumulate immense wealth for the crown. Her will provided detailed instructions on how this wealth was to be managed, including specific funds for maintaining the Union's military forces, for fortifying strategic castles, and for investing in trade routes. She bequeathed large sums of money not just to Eric personally, but to the crown of the Union, ensuring that her successor would inherit a stable and well-funded realm. This was a profound act of statesmanship, revealing a queen who thought beyond her personal reign and sought to institutionalize the strength of her creation. Beyond the political and spiritual, Margaret's will also contained highly personal and poignant bequests. She left specific items from her vast collection of jewels, gold, and silver plate and tapestries to her remaining family members, including Eric and his wife, Philippe. These were not just valuable assets. They were often symbolic items, representing the history of the United Kingdoms or the personal taste of a queen who was known for her refined court. She also made specific provisions for her loyal household, ensuring that her trusted ladies-in-waiting, her chaplains, and her household staff were well provided for, often with land grants or substantial sums of money. This act of loyalty to her retainers underscored her reputation as a fair and benevolent ruler. Even as she was known for her formidable will, perhaps the most astonishing detail in Margaret's will is her specific instruction for her burial place. She wished to be buried in Roskilde Cathedral in Denmark, the traditional burial site for Danish monarchs. She meticulously detailed the design of her tomb, desiring it to be magnificent and prominent. This choice, while seemingly traditional, was a powerful political statement. By choosing Roskilde, she affirmed Denmark's central role within the Union and her own place as its unifying figure. Her tomb, which still stands today as one of Europe's most impressive medieval monuments, is a physical manifestation of her enduring legacy and her desire for a grand, permanent resting place that would forever symbolize her achievement of the Kalmar Union. Her will also made sure to reinforce her unwavering commitment to justice and peace. She bequeathed funds for the resolution of old disputes between the kingdoms and for the maintenance of peaceful relations with neighboring powers. This demonstrates her long-term vision for a stable and prosperous Scandinavia, guided by the principles she had painstakingly established during her long reign. In essence, Margaret of Denmark's last will and testament is a monumental document that transcends personal bequests. It is a profound declaration of her unwavering faith, her astonishing political acumen, and her groundbreaking vision for a unified Scandinavia. It reveals a queen who, even in death, was actively shaping the future of a multinational empire, leaving a legacy that would impact centuries to come and forever cement her place as one of the most remarkable rulers in European history.